Okay, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 165 with my guest, percussionist Elliot Wallace. I met Elliot actually at SOCI in our very first year. Elliot was one of the few folks who took a chance on us, and I'm eternally grateful, and it was nice to catch up with Elliot. Elliot also grew up in near the same town that Eric grew up in North Canton, Ohio, and so he and I bond a little bit over our Midwestern Ohio roots. Elliot is an amazing drum set player. I really highly recommend that you check him out. His stuff's on Facebook, I believe, and an all-around lovely guy. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. It's always nice to get caught up with students and hear what they're doing. So without further ado, this is Elliot Wallace. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Sweet. Elliot Wallace. Before we get going here, I want to apologize to you because we're doing this podcast for many reasons. I have a sticky note with like a list of when I see somebody like, oh, I want to talk to them, I just write it down, and the sticky note has like 175 names on it. So you're on there. Nice. In no particular order, but I wanted to apologize to you first because I personally, I think the day that we connected online I was having a particularly rough day. I'll say I have a lot of anxiety around social media communication and the way people do talk or don't talk, or the way just communication in general in that form. To me, like I've been fascinated as to why like I have no problem talking on the record, unedited, having conversations with anybody, but as soon as I get online, I feel like I clam up, and I'm trying to ask myself like what the reasons are. Why is it? Is it because of some trauma? Am I a wuss? Like what are I'm a 40-year-old man who I feel like is a good person, But I was having a lot of anxiety that day about something that was going on, and then I just, by the grace of God, your post was like, boo, like slid by me, and I just lost it, and I apologize. I wasn't like mad, but I was just like, I knew you. You were at SOCI. I've known you for 8 years now, or whatever it is, and I was like, if Elliot played a drum part for me that sounded the way what he just wrote sounded, I wouldn't get mad at him. I would just be like, bro, let's dig in a little deeper here. Like, I think you're hiding something, and I don't know what it is, but like as your teacher in the drum world, let's do that. And I had a weak moment because that's not the place for me to reach out and teach, So I don't remember what I said to you, Elliot. I was like, what? I don't remember what my comment was. And
I put a very black and white statement. It wasn't very deep, and I know that. So it's
but again, it's not your obligation. You're not obligated to be deep to meet my anxiety that day. You know what I mean? But anyway, I reached out, I said something, and then you responded with like a really long post that laid out every one of your views, and I was like, oh, I don't disagree with a single one of those. I think we just disagree maybe on some of the plans to get from point A to point Z, but every one of these, I'm 100% on the boat, know, and I was like, why? Okay, there's something weird here. But anyway, Elliot's a great dude, an amazing drummer who somehow was willing to put himself in canon with himself just because I asked, so anyway, I just wanted to apologize up front that I don't think that's the way I ever want to communicate with people. And I apologize if like me reaching out that way was in any way felt aggressive on my behalf. So that's where I wanted to start. I have another prompt to get us going, but I just wanted to sort of get your reaction. I apologize for that's the way that this podcast came about. But
no, I thought it was actually kind of nice to be able to have that back and forth. I don't mind being prodded like that because I know sometimes I'll say some sort of blanket statement that doesn't really dig into what I'm actually thinking. And I think that's kind of the way that the world is working right now in a lot of ways. Like we're in the hashtag land where we have 3 words or 4 words to try to infer an entire ideology. And it's just it's not as simple as that. So it's totally fine to prod and to find out more. And I thought you did exactly what you said made sense. I think I remember that too. Cause my answer to you was also kind of short, but I think it was like, there's no justifying anything. It's just kind of like I was on my phone. So I was like, short answer. And then I came up with a long one when I could type on a keyboard. So.
And that's why I wanted to apologize to you because like, I feel like there's a little bit of I'm trying to check my rage day to day and be like, is this drive-by rage? Like, am I just Am I road raging right now? Like, I see Elliot in the car beside me say something, and I'm just like, fuck you, like, and then I just drive away, and I don't actually mean that or feel that about
Dude,
you.
I love having those moments with people I know. I definitely had a honk off with someone I knew the other day. we're at the intersection. We're like, dude, go! And I was like, oh, hey, I know you. And then we called. It was like, hey, well, nice to see you.
Well, and I don't know whether I will also say I might be triggered because the name Wallace for me is also very closely tied to your lesser half Dorian, who has also been on my podcast.
Yeah.
But anyway, just all that aside, I didn't want you to read anything into that statement as anything.
Thanks for saying something. Yeah.
More than it was. But that said, maybe we can get to some of that stuff later if you want. Again, like this podcast, I don't have an agenda past just sort of like wanting to get to know the person I'm talking to as coach better. And where we go, we go. So, and also an hour is zero amount of time to do anything really in depth. Even as though I love nuance, it's like after an hour, you're like, we barely scratched the surface. So let's not feel like we have to get anywhere other than this. Let's start with Elliot. You're from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Correct.
We're both Ohio boys and grew up. Did you grow up in Wadsworth?
I grew up in Canton, North Canton.
Okay, so Eric, did you know Eric at all?
No, he was a little above me, and I think he's a couple years older than me, so we never crossed paths. So
okay, did you go to the same high school as he did?
No, he went to the neighboring high school, so I went to North Canton City, and then he was in Canton, I think.
Okay,
so.
But you're from Ohio. Can you just tell me a little bit about like baby Elliot to like give me the $5 nickel and dime tour or 5-minute nickel and dime tour that got you from baby Elliot to this podcast, and then I'll maybe divert us and ask questions as we go.
Sure. Well, my parents are both musicians, so if that matters. But I'm the last of my mother's a piano teacher, and my father was a choral conductor, and I was the last of 6, so. I was sort of I didn't really have a lot of drive, so to say. I wasn't accountable for much because I was the last of 6. What are you going to do? So like all through school, I didn't really do school. I don't think I did any homework from like grade 2 to whatever, senior 12. Mm-hmm. And then one night I actually made the connection of like, oh, I actually don't want to screw myself over. I want to go to college for something. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of pulled it together that last year and did a lot of this remedial like computer stuff. I don't know. It was just get through it. And so the drumming thing kind of started for me. It's actually more in like just through listening. I was like really into music, and I was like listening to Slipknot a lot on the bus, and just got drawn to the drums. I found like a bass drum in my basement, so I started playing on that thing. This was like, I don't know, middle of high school or something. Mm-hmm. So I started kind of playing, and
were you in band programs?
Yeah, but I played the saxophone in the band program, and
okay.
Just because of like my unaccountability, I didn't really foster any good connections there. It wasn't like the teachers are great and stuff. It just was kind of, mm-hmm. I was just floating through it. I remember like I couldn't read music or anything, so I remember playing saxophone by ear from the people around me, mm-hmm. And getting called out by like they would do memory checks in the marching band or whatever, and they were like, all right, play your part. Okay, good. You got it. Play your part. Oh, cool. And then he was like, play your part. And he was like, you're playing the tenor saxophone part. Why are you playing that when you're playing alto sax?
You're like, because that's what the tenor saxes were playing.
I was like, they're right there. I don't know. So I just faked my way through, and he was like, where's your music? And I was like, I don't know.
Did you just go like this? Did you go right here? Right here.
Got it. Yeah.
In my heart, sir. Yeah. In my heart.
Yeah. So I definitely sort of faked my way through that. And then, college was totally a random choice. It was like I rolled the dice, took a couple drum lessons. I was playing drums and I took lessons from a teacher, but it was all kid and we didn't really do a lot of the classical stuff.
Let me ask you real quick, just sorry to interrupt. There's you mentioned that you're like, I didn't know how to read music, and you sort of like threw that aside and moved on. And I went to, and so did Eric, although Eric played piano when he was younger. I had a very typical, like very healthy I'm doing what I'm doing because of my public school education,
Mm-hmm.
in particular music education. And I think the steel drums, like Dover High School, was an outlier. I think at the time when I was there, like there's way more steel band programs now than there used to be,
Yeah.
for good reason. But I didn't really know. I mean, I know how to read rhythms, but I didn't know how to read pitches until I was a senior in high school. And I went to Joan Wenzel and I said, I would like to major in music. And she's like, you need to be able to read it. And I was like, what? And it, like, you know, the bell parts were played by the girls in the section. Like, it was the sort of, not in the bad stereotypical way. It was just the way things were, you know. I couldn't read music. It wasn't I was actively avoiding it, and I was just being the toxic male in the room and being like, no, I will play bass drum. No, I was super insecure. I couldn't read it. And Casey could. So I was like, Casey, why don't you play this, please? Yeah. I don't want to get called out for not knowing how to read pitches. And so I had to cram for like 2 months learning like All Cows Eat Grass, you know, all of that stuff. And then I had memorized my audition stuff. And both places, at the University of Akron, Ohio University, and at Ohio State, they put up sight reading. And I just said, nope. And I just said, fail me. Like, like, don't accept me. I literally can't do this. And it's like, it's interesting that you, like, how did you deal with the music literacy part to get into college? Or was there like, or did you somehow manage to, how did you work around that, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, short stories, I didn't. I kind of failed my first audition and didn't get accepted.
Where was that?
Akron.
Okay.
That was the only place I auditioned. So I didn't really plan. Like I said, I was just rolling down. I was just like I didn't really have a plan. So I was kind of just going.
You know who else auditioned at Akron? Eric.
Eric did? Nice. That's funny.
Yep. Larry drives a tough ship over there. You know, he's very, very critical of who he lets in.
Yeah, no, you can't let those people in. Yeah, sometimes. So I mean, I took like a lesson. I remember getting the audition sheet. I said out loud, what the F is a marimba? I didn't know what it was. So I was like, I was like, why do I have to learn a timpani thing? And so I sort of took a lesson from some music ed student at Kent State. Mm-hmm. And later down the road, I found out she played flute and didn't know anything about marimba. So it was kind of an odd choice, but, I mean, my audition was a total failure. It was pretty great. Like I walked in thinking I was like, yeah, I can play Kolos or whatever. And Doc Snyder was like, oh, Kolos, and he sang the first 2 bars. And I was like, oh,
wait, you were like, that's Kolos?
And I was like, you know, like playing it super slow. And he was just like, he just sat there and like, just like waited for me to just do it, and I was like, "This is awful." It
was not the first time he's heard Kolos poorly, I'm sure. So like, he wasn't going to get invested in the drama of that. He was like, "Well, let's get this over with."
He just waited, and then he was like, "Where's middle C?" And I was like, "I don't know anything about what I'm looking at right now." So, but yeah, I mean, eventually, he sort of took me. I took lessons with Dudek then, and so then I actually just found my first piece of paper Dudek gave me the other day. It's like green exercises. Just scales and a couple stick control pages and stuff like that. So
you came in the O100 program at Akron?
Yeah, that's right? What it is. Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit? I think you know, the O100 program is something that I think it exists on some level at most universities. There is sort of, I don't want to say remedial, but there's a level below being an official music major where you can get lessons and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think Larry in particular, from what I've seen, has integrated the O100 level as a really serious like feeder system to the university program. You're not the only person that I know that has come out of the O100 program and then gone on to be like really successful and do really great work. So I feel like Larry in particular does a good job at the university with that.
Yeah, he does do a good job. I mean, I think it's a good way of, first of all, being able to accept more people. And the whole idea is it's more of a social thing, like going to a college for that. I think you're experiencing the socialization of having good people all around you. Like, again, looking back to the audition day, I remember seeing like the back of somebody through the practice room and seeing sticks, like 4 mallets. And I just saw the sticks like sticking out like this. And I had no idea what was going on. I was like, what is that guy? Like, you know, and then then just being able to hang out around all those people and ask them questions. And then it kind of made the process easy. So by the time you had to audition again, I guess the basic idea is you don't get in, but you get in. You just have to take an audition to get into the 100, which is freshman level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that it takes like a semester if you work hard and just learn your scales and stuff. It's not like an impossible task for people that actually do the time and figure it out. But
Well, and how much do you think just the simple aspect of, like, let's say let's take the University of Akron as a good example here and say let's pretend Larry had done it differently, where you get accepted in the 100 level, except you don't socialize with the department. Like, maybe you're taking math classes, you're doing all the other things, but you're just taking private lessons once a week, and then you have a jury, and then like, for you, what do you feel would be the difference in the studio?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have a lot more floaters. You'd have more people just sort of get in and take some lessons and show up not practicing. And I mean, and even for people who are motivated to do it, it was hard because you'd walk into the hall. There's like a hallway. I mean, you know the hallway, but there's a hallway with like a door, and it's just a narrow hallway. And if you don't know any of those people, you walk to it and there's like 40 people just all crammed in there. You see like a dude getting humped. You're like, I don't want to go in there and get humped by someone. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a weird. I mean, the conversation around diversity and gender diversity and all this stuff in music is an important one. Mm-hmm. And I just keep thinking of, like, listen, I think we do want that, and I just keep thinking of my time at the University of Akron, and I'm like, it's just a little messier sometimes than just saying, like, let's throw over, because sometimes that hallway is really thin, and then Ron Martin's there, and Adam Wells is there, and there's the cast of characters can get pretty weird, and yeah, you can look down that hallway and make a snap judgment about what's happening down there. Yeah. Except in my experience, there were low moments for sure that were I to go back, I would re-say something or whatever. But I would say the general sense. I mean, have you ever been in the military?
No, but I have a story about that.
Has your brother?
He does the National Guard band.
Okay. Yeah. And like, there were some folks in the National Guard, like Adam Wells was in the National Guard whenever I was in school. There was one other person, I can't remember who it was, but I have some other friends who are in the military, and there's this sense of, like, real camaraderie. Like, not everybody, but almost to a person, when you're that closely tied to somebody, yes, there's all the complications and weirdnesses and inappropriate things, but there's another camaraderie that comes from that you can't really replicate without being forced into close quarters with each other.
Yeah, there's something about just being, like, squished together. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I guess it's foxhole bonding or, but yeah, even today I will walk through, going on the subway or whatever. I still feel like my early socialization to being packed crowds was like, I know, it's trying to get to the office. I was like, I just want to get there. Like,
I feel like being in that hallway trained me to be on a subway car. Like, you're always going to be touching somebody, and somebody's always going to be coughing on you.
It's good training. Yeah.
Well, so moving forward, so you went through your time at the University of Akron. You sort of you pop out of the 100 program, you re-audition, you get in, and then you get into the steel band world, and eventually you graduated and went to the Hart School. Can you talk a little bit about? And then you mentioned you had a military story, but get to that when you like. Yeah. But so what happened next? How did the next sort of chunk of time go?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, it was kind of like just trying to get literate was the hardest thing for me. So going to the Hart was a nice extension of Akron because they have a world music program as well. And that was the thing at Akron. I felt like I did. I never had any like hard times learning it. And I always felt like the social thing was cool. And like all the people you meet through it are just amazing people. And I also feel like it's a good way to sort of diversify your opinion or your like mindset and worldview, just to see what other people are doing. And you know that more than anyone, but it's like or more than a lot of people. Not more than
anyone. No. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't know it more than anyone, but I have been. It's not lost on me what just even if your steel band is all white, just having that there sort of cracks a door open wide enough where people. And if you're, as a teacher for, I don't know how long I'm going to teach, if it's for 40 years, like I feel like it's like that scene in Game of Thrones with Hodor, You know, like, oh, you don't
I
watch
did
Game of Thrones?
No, I watched like a lot
There's
of
a
it.
there's a scene where like you're like it's like hold the door, you know, and there's you know,
Oh yeah, okay.
my job is to sort of keep those doors open, and with the steel band, it's like I can crack that door open, and behind it is Trinidad and Brooklyn and all those other things. And you can do the same with, you know, an A-Way drumming group. You can do the same with an Mbira group. You know, Greg Beyer with the Barenbow ensemble. Like, you can only I can only teach somebody so much about steel band culture. I'm from Ohio and I grew up in a cornfield. Like, I'm only going to be able to get you so much to the at the point at which a student, I'm going to push that. I'm just going to shove them through the door and be like, get on the subway and go to Brooklyn now. I'm done. I don't know what else to tell you. You need to go have corn soup in a pan yard. That's the next assignment, you know?
Yeah. I feel like the best thing about it too is like every single instrument that you play at all has at least an entire culture that's of people that's just devoted their entire lives to playing it. Like there's Wiro players who only do that. And then there's Pandero players who only do that. And we're just as percussionists trying to freelance or whatever, you're sort of like just touching it. You're not like, I mean, I have some things that I've specialized in a way, but like in terms of like, going as far as the masters, like I think there's maybe two things that I could do like at a near that, but not even, you know, it's like I'm kind of bumping on the bottom there.
Yeah, like I know how to get in. I know how to get in the like if the guiro, if the basic like if that was like one of those like a NASCAR or something, like a really fast, you got to have a high level. Like I can get in and start it up.
Yeah, exactly.
But once you press there are other people who can turn that thing at 200 miles an hour. I'm just not that person.
Yeah, there's guys that like, this is my instrument. This is what I play. I do this this is my way in, and I play this thing. So it's like
hearing a virtuoso cuica player from like a true Brazilian, you know, group is like, whoa. Like, is somebody talking or is that a cuica? Like I can't actually tell.
Such a gorgeous instrument, and it's like I mean, they're all amazing. That's like, anyway, so the bridging to Heart was kind of like an Akron extension because they had a steel band, they had a African thing.
Ben Toth is an Akron grad as well.
Yeah, and it was a different atmosphere by a lot. And by the time I got there, they had the year before they had like 3 DMA students, 2 master's students, or like, you know, but they were all in the second years, and then they had a bunch of seniors and like no sophomores. So I was like first year masters with myself and 2 other guys, no one above us, like no hierarchy there. So we were the top, but like without any preparation. You're
like, bro, I can't even read music.
Toth was like, yeah, I mean, we had like freshmen just like playing marimba, like, yeah. I was like playing like these etudes, you know?
Yeah.
And so Toth, and then there was like a bunch of freshmen and like a few seniors, but they were all doing student teaching. So suddenly we had all this responsibility, and Ben Toth was so used to the studio running like clockwork. And then we just like stuck a wrench in that thing. And we were like, he was like telling us to do stuff, and we just like wander, and like, I don't know where that is. And he's like shaking us like, come on guys, we did figure it out, but it was a little bit of hard love to make it happen.
Are you a teacher? Have you ever done any teaching?
Yeah, I teach a couple community colleges and high schools.
And have you called any of your former teachers to apologize?
I have never apologized.
Elliot?
Yeah,
Elliot?
I should probably do that.
Elliot.
Is it a good idea?
It's a great idea.
Yeah, that's a good plan.
You don't need to flog yourself. Just call and be like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Elliot. I'm sorry. And then you can hang up. It's okay. You don't need to go further. Just make it right, you know? Make it right.
Yeah, no, they're all, I think all the relationships turned out good in the end, but there was a little bit of the wide-eyed, like not really knowing how to do things in a timely fashion. Like, hey, take that thing off the shelf and put it on the other shelf. And it took me 3 days to do it. You know, just like, I'm like, what was I doing? Like, I don't know what did I do between those 2 points? Like, just not, I don't know. It's a tough.
You probably practiced, you know?
Yeah, I practiced a lot actually. So that was like mostly what I was doing. And I was so into that. And I was kind of stuck in this like tunnel vision of just like practicing all the time. So, yeah, but I mean, it definitely like it was a really good experience. Ben was an awesome teacher, and they have a really cool program there where they have like a teacher rotation. So the first they have like an African drumming teacher and a Cuban percussionist and a Brazilian percussionist and Shane Shanahan, who's the um, Middle East drummer, and who else? They got this guy Ted Pilzecker, who's a vibes player. And so yeah, you just take a year of lessons. It's like January to January. So
Dave Samuels, I mean, he passed away, but Dave Samuels used to teach like improvisation. I never took any of the classes, but Murray Mass was telling like improvisation through like Bach and things like that, which sounded really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean it's a really cool thing, and that's actually was probably one of the biggest thing. I mean, Toth was amazing, and I learned a lot of marimba rep and all that stuff. But I valued those lessons a lot, and like the Cuban percussion with John Amira. I feel like I took Mike Sviro came to Akron so many times, and I had a lot of respect for the instrument. I had a lot of for congas, and I had a lot of like sort of knowledge of history in terms of what he had told me, but I'd never really like come to appreciate it in the full spectrum. And I still have a lot to do, obviously, but the John was like the first guy who kind of made it just like I felt my brain like expand with him. And it was one of the, I mean, that's the example of finding a teacher that works for you. Like, and I love Spyro and all the stuff he's taught me. But it you know, John was like, he said 2 words and I just walked around the whole week thinking about, thinking about those 2 words. So
it is fascinating to me. I mean, I think of like, if I had to, when somebody says who changed your life as a teacher, like I mean, if I ask that question to you, I don't know how your brain works, but my brain, my lizard brain just immediately throws up like 3 images that I can't stop, and I can think, I mean, there's more than 3, but like, Joan Wenzel comes to mind, Larry Snyder, Cliff Alexis, Joan Panetti, who was a music theory teacher, listening. She called it listening, or hearing is what she called it, as like a music theory ear training class.
Yeah.
At Yale. And she was, I had this, I went when you're talking about like the things you go to school and you see somebody holding 4 mallets and you're like, what? My first week at Yale, I showed up and, growing up in the part of Ohio where we grew up, going to some place like Yale, there's a class difference. People from Dover, Ohio do not go to Yale. And it's not like not like I grew up and people around me were like, never go to Yale. It's an elitist institution. It was just this thing that just was like, that's where other people go. Like, there's just no way, And so I went into Yale with a lot of insecurities of like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Like what, I don't recognize this water, this pool, these fish. I don't know anybody here. And my first ear training class hearing class with Joan, she had studied with Messiaen, and she's like, we're going to start today with Quartet for the End of Time. And she's like, how many of you in here know this piece? And everybody raised their hand except for me. And she stopped and she's like, you don't know this piece? And I was like, I have no idea who this is or what this is. And she's like, bird songs, nothing. I was like, nope. And she goes, after class, me, my office. And I was like, motherfucker. Like, I'm not even 3 days into New Haven, and I already, like, I should just go back. Like, it's okay. I'll just go back. Larry's nice. The steel band's great. I'll just play. It's fine. It's fine. I'll go back, So after the class, people snickered in the class, and I didn't know anybody. And Joan takes me to her office, and we sit down there, and she gets a record out, and it's a recording of Quartet for the End of Time. And she's like, sit there. And she had this big couch in her office. And we sat there. And she came and sat right beside me, shut her eyes, and just narrated the whole thing for me. Like, oh, my God. And this is the part where when he would tell me the stories of when he was writing this in the concentration camp. And here's the part where, like, this is the thing nobody talks about. And, oh, my God, this is so... And she's like, I wanted to be the first person to escort you through this piece. And I thought to myself, like... whoa, that is, like, she takes such responsibility for me in my ignorance of this issue, and she could have lit me on fire. And I think that maybe this is why I react to things online the way I do, is like, I've had my first interaction where I could have been torched in public, I was sort of put in a nice comfy pillow and escorted out of the danger zone and grown in solid, in a vacuum with her. She really, really groomed me to think about stuff like that. And it just changed my life, and it's like this idea that sometimes teachers, I don't think she knew in that moment what she was doing for me. I don't think she knew that she was going to change the way I look at soci students and the way I, when I see a soci student who comes in the room and has no idea who Steve Reich is. What's my role in that moment? Is my role to be like, you idiot? Don't you know who we are? Don't you know we've spent 15 years playing Steve Reich and you don't know who that is? Anyway, just to it's for you, it's just interesting that you had studied, Spyro is one of those people for me too, but for you, someone unlocked that key. But what were the 2 words that he said to you?
Honestly, it's more of the concept of how to play the sounds. Just the concept of a flat hand versus a curved hand. And nobody had said that to me, and I was like, oh, duh. I was like, it made sense. I was like, now I can do it. Great. Now I can play all the sounds I need to on command without having to think about it. But then it just took somebody just saying it in a very simple kind of physics way as opposed to a philosophical way. I love philosophy, but it's physics. I think my brain is kind of literal in terms of thinking of the physics of things and just not even a mathematical sense, but geometric and just rebound and all that kind of balance points and just things like that. That's how my brain works. And so he just tapped into that thing that made sense to me. And it's a simple thing. It wasn't like a worldview in that case, but just a way to access the sounds that I'd been listening to. I'd been playing with people. I've been, I love some of my favorite music comes from the Haitian tradition and all this stuff. So it's it's just one of those things that I was already listening to it, but I didn't have a way to access it myself, just through the sound world. Yeah, and he kind of fixed it in 2 words, and I was like, oh, okay, cool.
I mean, it's something as a teacher. I don't know what your experience is, but when I get done teaching a steel band or a steel band class at NYU or Princeton or whatever, or soci coaching, and I walk out of the room, the first thing I do is go down a deep well of insecurity about what I just said. It's something I don't talk about that often. I mean, my podcast is called Concert Honesty, and I'm telling you about it. But every time I leave the room, I'm like, fuck. Even if something goes well, I'm like, wah! There's always something where you misdiagnose something in the room, and I'm good enough now to know that okay, it's going to take me a week to untease that thing, but it's only a week. It's no problem. Early on, it was like, oh, that's going to take me years to undo. Oh no.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just thinking this the other day, the thing with learning an instrument, learning how to do anything, that's you, is there's no amount of data. There's no amount of research. I mean, maybe having a teacher that's well researched, but there's no way that anyone's experience can have you understand, because you're learning how to do it yourself. If you need to learn how to do a backflip, you can watch a bunch of physics videos on backflips, or you can there's not a bunch of qualitative research done into how to best do a backflip. So it's you just have to keep trying and figure out so it's all anecdotal. Every music thing and hitting a drum, getting a good sound, it's all anecdotal, and there's no way to be the best way or the worst way, or there is no way. It's just whatever your brain can comprehend and do. I mean, it's just tough because we live, we don't, but a lot of us try to go based on the blankets of information where it's we tested a lot of different small variables, and now we can kind of make an overarching trend and try to predict what's going to happen in the future with something. But you're you can't, with teaching, you're well, how can I get this kid to understand how to do this thing that I never had to think about, or I don't know. It's a tough thing with teaching because you're always trying to talk to people with a whole different set of experiences. So
everybody brings to the table their own personal traumas, their own personal joys, their own personal successes. You may see a flaw in someone's grip, but that particular flaw hasn't hindered them. and maybe are showing no signs that it's ever going to hinder them. And so is your responsibility in that moment to fix their grip, or is it to focus on something else?
Yeah.
And somebody may be having a really bad day and not getting something, but you don't understand that when they go home, they're not eating and they may be getting verbally abused. What is your role as a teacher in that moment? Like, ethically, what is your role? Is your role to try to box off the life that you're dealing with in that moment and only talk about paradiddles? Or do you have to talk about paradiddles in the context of their life? It's the struggle. I have it as a teacher. It's way easier to do, I think, in a solo one-on-one thing than it is to walk. The same thing applies when you walk in to coach a 20-person steel band. You're still dealing with 20 people who all have had individually bad or great days. Somebody practiced or didn't practice. Somebody practiced a lot and then shit the bed right in front of you. And they're all of a sudden like really frustrated. So it's just a constant. You're trying to keep all the balls in the air and pick the ones up that you drop as quickly as you can. But anyway, but one other thing I want to just clock here about you that I just sort of joked about asking you to do your drumming in canon with yourself, or offset from yourself. I remember you. What year did you come to SOSI?
It was the first year you did it, so 2000.
It was the first year?
2009, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a lifer, baby. You're one of the. I have to personally thank you for trusting us that early on.
Oh, no, dude, it was great. I love that. Yeah.
But you came in. What I remember from that is you had way more hair than you have now.
Yeah.
And you played Third Construction. Is that correct?
Yeah.
With Jacqueline and David Degg, I believe. And
with Victor and Bob. Bob,
yes.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I will say there's been. I can't say like you were a very good drummer at that point, so I don't want to sound disingenuous here, but I feel like you're more aware of the sound you're gonna make now than you were then. When I see you play drums, I feel like, oh yeah, like that's what happens. You know more about what you're gonna sound like before you hit something than you did then. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing that's like I can't teach a student that. I couldn't teach myself that. I just had to do it. I've learned over time what I'm going to sound like and what I'm not going to sound like before I make that sound. And I'm curious for you, is that something that you've been tracking on your own? Like you've noticed different things, or is it like been so organic? Like evolution is not something like that just happens. You wake up one day and all of a sudden you have a left foot. Like, no, that happened over hundreds of thousands of years,
Yeah.
For you, did you track that along the way, or
I mean,
what has been some of your experiences with it?
I think it actually had to do with just being held accountable for the sound that you're making. And, so you can't put everything you do into one paragraph or whatever, but I think a lot of it had to do with sort of positive and negative type reinforcement, where like I started doing shows. Like I've been playing like a lot of shows. That's most of my work is doing pit stuff. And so just regional theaters all around, and every once in a while in the city and stuff. So it's like the first, so I was doing it all in Ohio, just these rinky-dink, not community theaters, just no accountability. You play however you want. Nobody's going to say anything. Mm-hmm. And then I got to Heart and I did their show, and it was like some kind of, I think it was Miss Saigon or something. And it was one of those just like simple drum part, but then mostly percussion. So like the music director was like, hey, you actually play drums. Come do the show, the summer thing with me. So I ended up doing the summer thing, and it was like 3 different shows. And the first one was like percussion, and the second one was like pop show, like Footloose or something. Mm-hmm. And the third one was like an R&B show, like Dreamgirls. And the second show, this was like 2013 or something. Mm-hmm. And the second show, like I was sort of playing the way normal preparation level for myself at the time. And he sends me an email halfway through being like, I got to get someone else for the last show because, you're doing a good job, but like your sounds aren't right. You're hitting the cymbal. He didn't say that, but you're hitting the cymbal too hard and just things like that. And so I really had to sort of reassess what I was doing. Luckily, I had another year at Heart. So I tried to do more shows with him over that year. And then he called me for the next year being like, okay, I'll give you another. And then we've been playing together ever since. But it's like the whole it took me getting fired from a gig to sort of have to reconsider. And because like there's such a thing as too quiet, and playing quiet with like a good sound is like being able to do a backbeat sound, like a rim shot backbeat, but like mezzo piano and consistent is just hard. It's like you have to just practice that by itself. And maybe I just didn't really have the concept, and my hands weren't really there. And
the rim shot is the free throw of the music world.
Yeah,
yeah, you got to practice those.
Yeah, no, you just have to do it, and like you can't miss one. It's like that's the word. Yeah. You can't if you miss
missing a free throw is like the most. No matter how, like when Michael Jordan misses a free throw, you're like really, bro?
Yeah, you can't.
You're the best in the world.
Yeah, you really shouldn't miss those. Unless like this is. I mean, the people listening can't see, but this is what happens. Everyone like turns, like what? Everyone's head turns, and you're like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to miss that.
They only notice them when they're not there.
Yeah. So no, that's the whole. I mean, it took me kind of like having a lot of bad things, like in terms of like negative reinforcement, before I started figuring out how to do it the right way. Because nobody sits there and shows you. I mean, they do, but then their hands and their weight is different than yours, and the setting that they're playing in, like I was playing with these, there's this thing in Hartford where it's like a bunch of people get together and mostly gospel scene drummers. They get together and set up all the drums in a circle and just shred for like 4 hours. And it's awesome, but like has nothing to do with music theater. Like you can't like whack the drum in music theater stuff. You have to like it just doesn't cross. Yeah. So I was doing that and thinking, I was like, yeah, I can do this. And I was like, no, don't. It's not going to work. Yeah. So the context and I think that was a long answer, but
I also just want to point out, like, you've gotten some criticism, feedback. But good Lord. Sorry, Trump's coming up here. I read the news this morning. But you've had at bats. I mean, you can receive criticism. I've received criticism on my playing in school, except I only got to play the piece once.
Yeah.
Like that sucks. I mean, that's the like Achilles heel of the university system in the sense that like you can prepare students as best you can by learning music theory and being exposed to different types of music and ensembles and all that stuff. But what I think school, and I don't know whether it's impossible to do, just by the nature of what a conservatory is, and it's certainly, given all the discussions around education right now, I would posit that it's something we should push and struggle to try to figure out. But because I think the fact that you don't learn about that until you get in the real world is just like, if all you have to do is play that backbeat in the real world 50 times on 50 different shows, it's like, well, let's do that in school. Like, take your marimba solo out and put it on the square and play for people. Like, that's an at-bat. Put a tip jar out. If you make money, you played a gig. Yeah. Just get at-bats. I mean, because that's the, like, you can hit one home run. It's hitting 70 over the course of your life. I mean, without steroids. It's hitting 70 over the course of your life and having really shitty years where you hit 20. Yeah. And, and then having to make up for that over the course of your life, that gets you the sort of totality of your sound and whatnot. And I just feel like I've always been bummed. My biggest disappointments in school were, working for 3 months to play Rain Tree, coached by Bob at Yale, first time I'd ever memorized an ensemble piece, and I walk out there and within the first 3 minutes, it's all gone. All gone. I just blew over the F sharp changes in Rain Tree, and Joan Panetti was sitting in the front row. She didn't know the piece, but I got off stage and Bob was like, "Really?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, really." That's what happened, and that's a bummer. Like that is discouraging enough, I think, for most musicians, including myself, to be like, "Nah, I'm done." Like, yeah,
it's crazy, man, and like the after school, like, I mean, this is sort of more of my personal philosophy on just what I practice now and all that stuff. It's like I don't really practice repertoire the same way. I mostly practice like permutations and just chord, like chop. This quarantine has been kind of great because I've been fine tuning some stuff I've been leaving aside for a little too long.
Yeah.
But it's been obviously hard for a lot of reasons. But it's just been one of those things where I think that people don't really focus on the fundamentals enough in teaching, and then you want to get to playing these hard marimba pieces and these hard snare drum pieces, but it's like, if you can't subdivide five and accent any note in the five, why are you trying to play fives? Like, what are you trying to do? I mean, I remember learning polyrhythms through Stuart Saunders Smith's music, and I loved his music, and some of my favorite musical experiences were playing those pieces. But it's like, I remember I didn't get it right until I was in my second year of master's. I remember doing it as like an undergrad and getting these fives that start on the second eighth note or whatever, and having to cross the bar. And if you can't conceptualize the what's going on, you're just faking it. And you don't think anyone can tell, but he's sitting there with the score, and he's like, yeah, I can. That's that five. Nah, that wasn't right. Or it's just.
It was more of a 4 plus a 1 at the last minute. You know,
exactly.
Less of a 5.
It's like, you should be able to know, and I actually take that. And I know we've been talking about drumming mostly, but I've been sort of trying to take that sort of honesty, self accountability for my own like musical integrity. Like, if I sort of put it on myself to not play any bad notes, unless it's like, I mean, you do sometimes, but it's just if you have 2 octave Ds or something, and you just don't miss it. Like, at least try not to. I mean, you're going to at one point, but try not to, and be as accurate as you can in the way that you portray it. So therefore, that isn't one of the things that gets in the way of people criticizing or listening to it or trying to enjoy their experience. So it's like, and that transcends music. I think that goes to like trying to, if you're going to talk about issues that are happening right now, or if you're going to talk about anything, that just try to come from a place of, if you're going to say something, just make sure it's as close to right as you can be, and then be willing to accept people going, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right, and go, oh yeah, sorry, I'll fix that. I'll correct my knowledge. And that's, I know I didn't want to, I don't know how much we want to go into it, but it's like
we can go into it as much as you like.
Yeah, but seeing the way people talk right now, it often comes from a place of reactionary kind of, just reactionary. They see something, they immediately report. So I've been finding something that is useful as like Google image search. If somebody shares a picture with a caption, just search the image. Half the time it's not even the same thing. It's like some other unrelated thing. and it's a simple thing to do. Just trying to, and I'm not going to call everyone out, like, but just so I know, like, I'm not going to share some image of somebody getting beaten up with no context. Like, it's just like, doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't, I don't know.
I've been seeing a lot of memes getting passed around to sort of, I don't know what your thought on this, but I felt like in 2016 I was the only person in the group, and in my immediate like working colleagues in the new music world that knew Trump was going to win, and every time I said it, they laughed at me, and every time I was like, you're missing the boat here. It's like when you call everybody a bigot, that approach. And then when Trump won, I kept saying, I was like, I told you. And then they're like, well, we've told you the whole Midwest is racist. And I'm like, hold up a second. Like, you're wrong. I mean, no, you're not wrong. Yes, there are racists. I'm not arguing with you on that. But hold up a second. I told you what was going to happen. It happened. And now you're telling me the reason it happened? Like, don't you want to ask me? It's like, I knew the sun was going to come up. And I've been seeing so many memes being passed around by people in my own community that are like pictures of what you and I would probably affectionately refer to as white trash. But I mean, I grew up in places where the people that are being depicted in cartoonish ways exist. They're real people. Some are my relatives. Some of my relatives don't wear shirts when they go outside. Some do. Like, and some are overweight. Some aren't. Like some of them wear NASCAR hats. Some don't. But then you see this one image has been going around, and there's clearly like photoshopped swastikas all over it, and Confederate flags photoshopped into it, and Trump 2020 photoshopped into it, and it's like getting passed around, and they're like, "See, we got to get Trump," and I'm like, "Hold up a second, I'm with you on the Trump is bad thing. I get it, I'm with you, but the tool you're using is fake. It's not real, and I don't like." And then if you point it out, you're like, "Well, are you complicit in the?" It's like, hold up a second, like we're not even talking about the. Okay, fine, share the fake meme. I don't care, like, and. I'm seeing it on both sides, but actually, in my Facebook feed, just admitting it's siloed just like everybody else's, I try to unsilo it as best I can by not blocking anybody and accepting every friend request I get. It's pretty predominantly coming from the left on my feed. That doesn't mean that's not proof that that's true. Just on my feed, I see more fake memes coming out that are anti-Trump and anti-other stuff that I'm just like, I can objectively prove with one Google image search that this was generated by a Russian bot. Like, it doesn't take me but 3 seconds.
It's not hard to figure out. And that's like the moral of the story is it's not hard to find some of these. Some of them are, some things are just not traceable because it's some guy's flip phone or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way to know like where some sources are, but for the most part, like we can find out pretty easily and with minimal effort. And so even just having a conversation about how to move forward in the situation that we're in is made harder by not representing the information correctly. And that's, I think that just goes, there's so much of that in any aspect. And a parallel I like to draw in my brain, I haven't really said this out loud, but it's like with science movies, when they screw up all the science, it's all fake, and they're trying to get you to believe like The Martian is an example where there's this giant.
Neil deGrasse Tyson goes hard in the paint on some of these movies.
Oh yeah, and I've been checking out some of his stuff, so I might be taking some of his opinions. But there's a scene at the beginning where there's this giant windstorm on The Martian, and it's just like it like knocks. That's the whole point. Is it knocks like Matt Damon or something? What's his? Is it him? I don't know.
Yeah. Martian is Matt Damon. He grows potatoes and poop, I think.
Yeah. And the potatoes and poop is the accurate thing. They nailed
I know.
that.
That's
they
got that right, but the wind in space they didn't get right.
Where did this wind come from? Like,
where did fire in space come from? Doesn't fire need oxygen?
Yeah, I'm like,
where did the sound of? Wait. Why is there sound up here?
It totally doesn't make any sense.
Shouldn't this whole thing be in silent? Shouldn't this be a silent film?
Yeah. There's a lot that, and I just wish that distracts me. I mean, that movie gets enough rights, and they actually get what I think is cool is they get the relationship of the astronauts. They get that you're stuck together with the same people for however long, so you develop this sort of code word, and nobody freaks out over things because you are trained to not freak out. And so anytime you see a movie of astronauts like freaking out over something, you're like, that's not going to happen. That's not how it works. And to draw the parallel is like, if we actually try to do our best to accurately portray what's really happening in the world, it makes a easier time having the conversation about like racial inequality and discrimination and systemic discrimination, because we're not basing it off of our own eyes and our own experiences. Like, it's like, I don't have the same set of experiences that people who have gone through this do. So I think it's like my job to listen to people and to try to, and we've actually been asked, and I think I watched one of your podcasts the other day. Who was that? Sheldon Hoyt?
Sheldon Hoyt, yeah.
Yeah, and he gets into this a little bit, but it's like you're only going off of your own experience. And what my friends have asked who have gone through this have basically said, like, we've been saying this stuff for years. Nothing's really changed, or little has changed. So it's your turn to say something. It's your turn to help us, because we've been trying, and we've had black faces in high places, so to say. We've had the president, and it's still happening. So like what we're doing isn't enough, and it's like sort of
we literally took a knee, and you told us to play football.
Yeah, exactly. So
you
it's
called
like
us sons of bitches and said get off the field. Like, you do have to, like, this is where when folks on the right push back against that, like, there's a little, that's where I'm like, hey, let's just recognize an objective truth. You didn't have to, I'm not asking you to agree with Colin Kaepernick's protest. Mm-hmm. I want you to agree that was about as benign a protest as a human being could do in public, literally just bending down and taking a knee, and you all exploded. So let's just put this like on the spectrum of like what you consider to be violent protest to nonviolent protest. Colin Kaepernick's like way over here. Mm-hmm. And so I just need us to like understand, like you can't be surprised. We don't have to agree with the response, but you can't be surprised. That's where I'm like, come on now, like people.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise. And I mean, and like I feel like people who go through academia, we've sort of developed a trust system of data. So like even if I don't know, listening to a lot of different people helps, but it's also like looking at the data helps to point out that it's actually happening. Like there's a big argument with whether or not it's real or not, and mm-hmm. I think that that argument is based on no evidence, because it is like based on the data. Like we know a lot about the sun. We can predict it's going to have a grand solar minimum this year by a degree of like 20 watts, like because of sunspots. We're going off of evidence to be able to make predictive information about with like, there's so much research going into like racism in this country specifically, where we have criticized that as much as you want, like in terms of like, oh yeah, maybe it's easy to get published by doing that. It's harder to get published with the opposing view. So you can argue for the leftism of academia all you want, but we have this mountain of information that then is our job to sort through and figure out, like, it's not all true. It's like, leave it to scrutiny. Like everything is not true that you read. All studies aren't right. Most of them are wrong. Like that's the idea of studying. You study something,
aggregate the most amount of information you can get.
Yeah.
And then what the overarching consensus is probably is pointed in the right direction. Like, yes. Like I'm saying it's hard to be definitive if I'm not looking at all the data about something, but like by and large, when I look at, I don't know, it's just like any decision I've made in my life has been based on looking, like you look at a whole room of soci students and you're like, okay, like you're scanning the room, you have to like, yeah, everybody in here, there's a few folks I think, like you can make a judgment and be like, all right, there's a couple folks I just need to keep an eye on, not sure why yet. And then the 2 weeks goes by and you're like, oh, you know, this thing I thought made sense. Turns out I was wrong, but I was right about this other thing. And it's like, it's by constantly like zooming in, zooming out, zooming in, zooming out, zooming in, zooming out. And that's a skill just like learning how to bench press. Like you start off bench pressing the bar. And so like, if every day everybody could challenge themselves to be like, I'm going to obsess about something on the minutia, but every time I do that, it's like having the rubber band on your wrist. Like if you obsess about the minutia, whack, like you got to zoom out and force yourself to be like, how does it apply to the big picture at all? Because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's an outlier. That's why outliers are called outliers, you know? Yeah. But if you don't do both, if you're not constantly looking at the big picture and the small picture, I don't know. It's where you can get in these circular. Just to bring it back to my apology to ahead of time at the beginning was like if you're constantly just in the loop, your own loop of reinforcement. I think it's the danger of confirmation bias on social media. It's the danger of confirmation bias when you're playing in a chamber music group and you've played one type of music your whole life and you feel like that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And
then you talk to somebody and you're like, why don't you think Steve Reich is as important as I do? It's like, well, because I've had my bias about it just reinforced by being in a car with three other guys who are like, Steve Reich is great, you know? And so, of course, I just need to acknowledge that as my bias. It does not mean Steve Reich is a bad thing. It just means I've had a lot of it. Like, it's a diet I've almost eaten exclusively since I joined the group. So I just am going to change my diet up or be aware that my diet isn't that varied, you know? And I wish that this was, I wish humans were more aware of this. It's just a wish. I'm racist. I do think like the conversations about being racist and white people needing to own this thing. I've known I was racist since I was 19. Like I was one white kid in an entire Trinidadian panyard, and I understand. I was like, oh, this is why I have the lizard brain part of me fires up, and I see somebody walking down an alley that I don't recognize in Brooklyn or wherever, and I'm like, oh, you know. That's hundreds of thousands of years of DNA being passed down to me that I have to now, like bench press, go, no. Be a person. I have the same thing. If I see someone that I think is attractive, oh, nope.
Yeah.
Push that down. Don't be a maniac.
Yeah.
Like you get mad because someone says something racist. That makes me angry. And if the same reaction for me is to go, like, I feel like I need to be like, let's talk. Why do you think that? Oh, it turns out you learned that. Let's talk about that. And if I just am always going, like all the time, like it's exhausting. For me personally, it's exhausting. It's anxiety inducing. And I'm just bad at functioning in those worlds.
I agree. I mean, and that's like to sort of talk about the social media thing just briefly. I know we're probably at the end, close to the end of the time or whatever, but it's like the echo chamber effect. That's a common word where you say something and kind of creates a feedback loop. So the people that like what you like also like the same thing, and then they see what you put, and then you see what they put, and it's sort of like this big.
Your thing gets shared by one of your friends, except if you don't see who shared it, it's like, oh, cool, Dorian shared it, and then you saw Dorian share it, and then you share that, and it's like,
it's just it's a little bit of inbrew in terms of.
Just to be clear, I love Dorian.
He's great.
He first 5 minutes on a podcast, I was like, so are you a free speech absolutist? And he's like, yep. And then about 5 minutes in it, he was like, actually, I'm not.
Well, yeah, and that's the whole censorship on social media is another issue. But I mean, he's very he gets really invested in researching and finding out stuff, and then it's like once he puts those blinders on for whatever he's looking at, it's sort of sometimes it gets blinders, and he's just like, oh, and
I could imagine you guys at Thanksgiving dinner just like you basically agree on stuff, and then there's a point where you're just like, fuck you, Dorian.
Yeah,
there's a chicken leg flying across the table.
Yeah, ketchup bottle. So I guess it's like the something, and I don't know if this is a good thing or not, but something I've been trying myself is going into these groups, not anonymously. I know people create burner accounts to go and talk to alt-writers and go and talk to these blatant, explicitly racist people.
Going on, Dorian was saying he goes on the website, the Daily Stormer, and legit Nazi.
That's too far for me because those people don't really listen to reason. So I'm sorry, they just don't not all. Some of them do. I've met a couple, but I've been trying to branch out and just have the conversation with people about it, and just using more of a. But every once in a while, I'll be like, burn the system down, because I do, and then I corrected it later. I think I said don't burn it down. Just dismantle it. Have it be a controlled demolition. But I like fire, so you can still burn it down. Still burn it, but just control.
I just want to recognize here, you do need to admit whenever you're burn it down, you got to be but I also really like fire. So just know that.
Fire is the thing I like. So I like burning things. It's nothing to do with destruction.
Let's put it in a frame. We need to know what we're talking about. What's the context around it, Elliot?
Yeah. So that's kind of and that this is you could jump around with this thought process all you want, but the thing that really tipped me to trying this tactic, and to whatever degree of success, who knows, but is knowing about I think it was 2013 or something like that, when the Egyptian revolution happened, that actually started because of a Facebook group that actually started from social media spreading this idea. And then the 2016 election that was swayed by a lot of these misinformation and all this false news. And then if you look at the rise of Putin, that was the same kind of thing, this misinformation, false news kind of thing. The echo chamber of social media creates these pockets of thought and belief that then they're able to strengthen and empower these kind of thinking. So it's if you just go in and just share a meme that they don't see before, and then get these guys fighting on your wall, then suddenly they're exposed to a wider variety of, you kind of mess with the algorithm a little bit by engaging them. And it's annoying on my wall when I had to, there's some people I had to cut where this guy was sharing all these videos to my wall, and I was like, you can't just do that all the time. Sorry, man.
Were the videos obscene?
Yeah, they were violent. They try to take videos of black people being violent to white people and being here's my proof that this is happening. I'm like, okay, that's evidence for that specific case, but that is not an overarching trend. Anyway, it's hard to
toss the data point on the pile and let's see where it
exactly
where it measures up.
So, but that's kind of been one of the tactics I've been trying to do online, because I know my social media is very just random. It's like I share whatever I want at any point, and I never really thought about having a directive for it, or I never really. And Instagram's kind of died for now. I haven't really been using it that much. But I just trying to engage people on maybe my side, but on the opposite, like on opposite kind of thought, like maybe further on each side, like more left and more right, and just trying to get people talking. And then so when I share, like I said, it broadens their algorithm, because I know it's not them making the decisions. It's not me making the decisions. It's the algorithm that tells you what to see. And
this is part of the
hard.
frustrating thing. I mean, just the truth. I mean, algorithms aren't alive. They're not a thing that makes decisions. It just channels, it like funnels information to you based on like you pressed a 1, so it's going to send you a 0. And it learns that like you keep pressing 1. It's like the mice that like go to the water that has cocaine in it, or it goes to the water that just is regular water.
Yeah.
They go to the cocaine. They get addicted. And when people are sent a meme that pisses them off and makes them think, like the Photoshop Nazi white trash meme, if that makes you engaged with their platform because you're pissed off, that's the same as cocaine in the water. And I think it's, listen, I've been at the feed trough. I know what it's like to get addicted.
Yeah.
You know, my Facebook profile picture is Josh Lyman from West Wing. It was because I was watching West Wing in 2006 when Facebook came to Yale. It was only at Harvard and Yale and Stanford and like the Ivy League schools. And I set that account up and I watched it go from coffee pictures and I just went to the bathroom as like your status update, you know, stuff like that, to it evolved in real time to become this thing that is predominantly, and I think this is maybe Facebook and Twitter. Instagram somehow has managed to sort of skirt the volatile, vitriolic grossness of humanity by and large, but at least in my experience with it. But there's something about the algorithm where it reinforces, like, we can teach it. Like, if we had a like government program to be like, fine, we're not going to regulate Facebook. What we're going to do is teach our populace how to communicate on Facebook properly. Or, well, I mean, let me back up. And the government telling people how to communicate properly is scary. That usually never goes well. But if we as a society decided, like, well, let's hack the algorithm. Let's teach it. It tells us it's doing what we ask it to do. What if we all stopped clicking on those memes?
That's the trick. Yeah.
Like, yeah, and it's hard. But if you, it was funny. A couple of weeks ago, prior to the George Floyd murder, I decided to try an experiment and be like, I'm not going to like any posts. I'm not going to comment on any posts. Just I want to see what happens after a week to my algorithm, bro. It got down to 3 people. The bottom of the Facebook algorithm is just 3 statuses just kept coming over and over and over again. And I felt like I was like, you know, that scene in Silence of the Lambs where he's like put the lotion on the skin and you look down and like I felt I was in that hole in someone's basement with my dog, like, help. Like, there's nobody. It wasn't scary. It was just like, I don't even know who these 3 people are on my but it just kept the same 3 over and over and over again. And then I liked another post, and it was like a deluge. It was like I had found a secret portal, and all of a sudden the algorithm was like, you're back.
Yeah, and it's like we found you. Yeah,
yeah, and it was over. And it was amazing to me how quickly it went back to, you know, crazy memes and whatnot.
You sneezed in the wall in the Matrix when you were trying to get past the agents and Cypher sneezes. You
should try. I recommend the just do the wall yourself off once and just be like, I'll still be on. I'll just scroll. Yeah. And then try some things like what happens when you scroll and you stop on a page, but you don't actually click on it. Yeah. Because Facebook, like Percussion, we know how long someone's cursor hovered over a thumbnail. It's called metadata. Yeah. So does Facebook. Mm-hmm. And so try that once. See what happens when you just hover over an Adidas post. And then, terrifying. Dude, 3 pictures later, you're going to see a picture that you took, that I took. I did it once. I hovered over an Adidas ad, and about 3 posts later was a picture of me that I took wearing red Adidas. Wow. With another Adidas ad right after it for red Adidas. And it's like, okay, all right. Yeah, I don't know what I did, but I keep getting ads for ladders
Home Depot just, they all, I don't know what I did, but it's literally the same ad. I started taking pictures of it because maybe that's why, because I started taking pictures of screenshots of this guy, look, with a ladder being like, come to the Home Depot, get a ladder. So that's been like weeks. I don't know what's going on. I
think this is, again, we shouldn't judge Facebook off of these two anecdotal data points, but my suspicion is, if I had a hypothesis, is that if we threw these data points on the pile, I think we would all trust Facebook and the data we get way less. I think if we all realize how many of us were getting ads for, like, you know, psoriasis and gout and like colostomy bags. I get colostomy bag ads.
Well, you know, you never know.
When, my dad had ALS. He didn't have a colostomy bag. Like, what? Why don't I get like wheelchair ramps ads sent to me? You know,
it's a fascinating world. But I guess to kind of hone it in it's like the whole idea of all it takes sometimes to find out what is true and what is not true is just type it into Google. If I could have like a perfect system, it would be like, okay, the share button opens Google with the title of the thing in the search bar, and you just have to press enter, and then you could share one of those things. That's cool.
No, like, to me, this is where, like, when we talk about, when people say things like Facebook, we need to dismantle Facebook. I'm like, okay, but wouldn't it be easy? Wouldn't it be what if? How much better would Facebook be if before you shared or anytime anybody shared a post? Let's make it as easy. Let's keep it as easy to share things, right? But we know the metadata. Let's say if Elliott Wallace shares a post about how terrible the Democrats are, right? Democrats are terrible for nominating Bernie because you're Bernie, bro. I'm not saying you are. I don't actually know. But that's your stance. Except when you share it, there's a little note that says Elliott Wallace read the first paragraph of this essay.
Oh, yeah, a little verification.
Yeah, just so you know, Elliott did not read this article. Like how much? I'm just curious psychologically. If I knew how much you read the article, I would be. Oh, I'm not going to get invested in Elliott's crazy thing. He didn't even read the damn article.
Yeah, he didn't read it.
But if the metadata says, you know, Elliott Wallace read this article 3 times, okay, I'll listen. Like, you can still say the same crazy thing, but I'll listen.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if that's
wild, man. That's not a bad idea. I mean, I think that's like. Maybe I don't know if any kind of conversations like this are happening. I know that for a long time, they've been trying to do the free speech thing, being like, we're not responsible for what people, it's like Pirate Bay where like, okay, we know people are sharing movies, but it's just a platform. Well, we can't control people sharing movies. And but it's like,
that's like creating a city street and being like, well, we can't control if people sell drugs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We can't control that people crash into cars. We didn't put the lines.
Except you do.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't put a stop sign. Yeah. That's a good analogy. Because my neighboring street, they just put stop signs and people are like, they're just flying through it. I'm like, well, because
the argument, you mentioned censorship, the argument around regulating Facebook very quickly goes to censorship. And when I think it's like, no, okay, I'm not a free speech absolutist, but I think policing language historically can be dangerous when not done well. And when language is implemented by a government, it all depends on who's in power. But I think regulating, how is telling everybody how many times you've read an article regulating free speech? It's not. What it's doing is putting some sort of, there's capital there. Like your sort of authority on this particular statement, we're just going to call a ball or a strike. You swung 3 times at this and you missed every time. Yeah. But you're welcome to keep swinging. But if there's somebody else who hits a home run every goddamn time they walk up there, I'm going to keep pitching to that guy. Like, I want that guy on my team. I don't want you on my team. You can be on my team, but I don't need to listen to you. Yeah. If you're just going to keep sharing shit you've never read, all you're doing is stating an opinion, which you're within your rights to.
Yeah,
but
and it's
I'm also within my rights not to listen.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's like, we'll see what ends up happening in the long run for sure. I mean, I don't really have any kind of speculation that I don't have any evidence for knowing what's going to happen. Like, because I don't think anyone really does at this point. Like, nobody really knows, and that all we're doing is speculative, and so it's like, and that's the hard thing about like sociology and like studying human behavior is like it's almost like quantum physics. Like observing it kind of screws it up. So like, and we're living in it. We're a part. It would almost be easier if we were like studying Australians or something, like, because we're not involved. It's
It's
like,
also like, just again, like, having been, again, I do not, I want to say this, I'm not abdicating Mark Zuckerberg of any responsibility he has. This is his company, and he's responsible for it in the same way I'm responsible for So Percussion. If So Percussion was causing the downfall of democracy, I would like to think I would want to do something about it.
well, you should probably do something about it then.
Well, I would think democracy doesn't even know we exist, so I think we're probably okay for a second. But just from the empathy side of things, like, it's hard for me to, like, Mark, I was there. I mean, it was an app that was just comparing hotness between, I mean, that's obscene and stupid.
Yeah.
But if somebody had told Mark Zuckerberg, hey, bro, you need to build in some stuff with this hotness comparing app of yours because the Russians might use it to elect a game show host. Like,
dude, it's wild.
They got to fix their shit. But this idea that, like, you can predict or know the ramifications of what's happening, to me, it's so messy. And I do think now there are little things we can do to hold ourselves accountable that don't censor speech and don't make anybody feel like they can't voice an opinion that's slightly dissenting from what seems to be the consensus, on some platform where you don't even know who these people are, And if we can just sort of, like, that to me seems to democratize the more information we have just about what it is people are sharing. Seems to me to be at least a next step. But again, I'm a drummer. I don't know how much I have the ability to fix this stuff other than to talk about it. And Elliot, again, I'm grateful for you coming on the podcast and talking about this stuff. And you're welcome to anytime as we move forward here in life. We're all making it up as we go, and so I may ask you for some help at some point to help me make it up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I enjoyed chatting with you, buddy. Stay safe. Is there a place where folks can sort of find more out about you online? Website?
Probably the most representative of my playing is Instagram, although I do just post random things. It's like Elliot_Wallace Instagram. So
fancy, bro.
I know. My name was taken already, so I just added some characters. But yeah, that's probably the best place because I mean my website's super out of date, and I don't really use it that much. So it's mostly Instagram, Facebook if you want to have some political conversations, but mostly. For the drumming, it's that. So
yeah, and I think if you're a drummer, if you're just a nerdy drummer and you want to see somebody drum really well, your videos, you shoot them from overhead, and the videos are like they're really really great. So I think if you like that and you don't want to talk about politics or think about Facebook ethics, just watch Elliot drum. You won't regret it. So Elliot, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Be safe, be healthy, and I hope to talk to you soon. Okay.
Thanks, man. Have a great day. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. You got it, buddy. Take it easy. Okay, this podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. Hilarious vids, awesome pedagogy. Check it out, liquiddrum.com. Also, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle makes and builds all of the drums that I teach on and play on in So Percussion and at Princeton and NYU. Check it out, dunleavypans.com. And finally, paninmotion.com, spreading the word about pan, advocacy, you name it, paninmotion.com. Okay, hope you're well. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.